We have Councilmember Harrington,
Yep.
Councilmember Matheson.
Yeah.
Were you able to go look at the minutes from last time?
Yep.
Great, anything?
Nope.
Nope, great, so we'll pass those. Our first order is the appointments to the Public Arts Commission. So we have two. Any questions before? Are these replacements if they're partial terms? They are.
They're filling the unexpired terms.
Okay. And I see that the Housing Commission appointment is listed, but then there's no item for that. Is
Yeah, that one may have to wait. Is there some confusion as to whether the individual that we thought was no longer gonna be serving is maybe gonna continue to serve?
Is
So
actually-
I think we should wait on that.
Okay, so if there's no further questions, then I'm just gonna, we can move that along to the consent agenda and go to the Title VI discussion for OPT.
Mm-hmm.
And this is we're revisiting. The policies for the Title VI plan. And we have our HR expert. Were there any questions about any of the policies, procedures that on this draft?
I'd just like to say something about it. My understanding is there's been no complaints, and, institutional memory goes back 9 years, and, there's no reason not to just move it along.
Okay.
Can I add something?
Yes.
So, our 5311 capital application and our operating unit application was due for submittal by June 30th. This policy needed to be submitted to DOT with it be active. The application was going to be possibly at risk.
Okay.
So, last week, David and I worked with DOT and we got it extended to July 2nd.
Great.
So, I believe that council will pass it on the 1st, and then we have to immediately get it to them on the 2nd,
Yep. Okay.
okay?
Okay.
Do you remember why this came back down to us? Because I remember us saying it was all right the first time.
I wasn't really privy to the discussion as to why it got sent back to us. I think it might have something to do with Councilmember Foster Rothbart's questions. Did you want to share those or address the questions that you had?
Yeah, it was my fault that it got sent back to my place. Basically, I had questions about could language, the broader language that just supports the city's broader diversity and inclusion efforts being incorporated in this. And what I learned from your memo, it seems like the answer is no, basically, that we get boilerplate language that we don't have much. I don't know, maybe you could talk
Sure,
about that.
yeah, so the template that they give us has very specific instructions as to which sections we are allowed to amend and which ones we aren't. And even the ones that we are allowed to amend, they give us, in most of those cases, they give us like 4 or 5 different paragraphs, and it's kind of choose your own adventure, and you pick the one that most commonly applies to you. So that policy is very much where we're, putting in our specific statistics and our specific, mileage stuff and the headway time but for the most part, we have very little leeway as to the language of the policy itself. It really, the vast majority of it is just boilerplate language that's being forced upon us by the federal government.
so I think it seemed a shame to let the opportunity go that we pass a resolution that didn't cover as, you know, because the three categories I think that of people who are covered are just based on race and
Yeah, they're different than,
Title.
yeah,
Right.
Article 15 of New York State, human rights, you know, that covers our employment law, that's what's on our front page of the newspaper. Front page of our website has a lot more to it. I believe there's 20-ish protected classes in law under that, you know, but in this one, yeah, it is only the four, that we're looking at here. That does not stop us from, taking complaints regarding other ones. In fact, we did have a complaint, in 2024, that HR Director Temming handled, that was taken very seriously, did lead to a termination. You know, it did not have anything to do with any of those four protected classes. In fact, it didn't have any of the ones that would be under the New York State Department of Human Rights. But it was addressed strongly because we felt like it was a pretty serious violation, of just basic human kindness. So, even though that's the only thing that it shows that they're requiring us to, hold a standard to, we're certainly in no way, limited to that policy. And if we see somebody being mistreated, it doesn't really matter what the reason is, we're gonna take aggressive action against it, so.
Right. So that, I mean, that was my concern. Well,
If I may, Mike, I just
Yeah.
want to point out, I don't know if you've had a chance to take a look at the item in the agenda.
yes.
If you have proposals for perhaps expansion of the language, or you want to, you know, have a discussion about perhaps making some amendments, or, you know, something more explicit in the actual policies, it sounds as if there's room to do that.
It would be an additional policy.
Right.
So this
Right.
one would be submitted to the feds for their.
Right, and then,
Yeah,
yeah,
but if we wanted to go above and beyond that with local policy, there's nothing stopping us from
right.
doing that.
So it sounds like we
Well,
could have a conversation about that, perhaps.
We did have a
in-
conversation about that. I
Right.
think you weren't at that council meeting.
Okay.
I presented exact language.
Okay.
That I recommended, so if you look.
Oh,
back,
okay,
it's-
yeah, then I would like to see that. So are you moving forward, like where
Well,
does that
I mean,
reside?
it's up to you guys. It seems obvious that this has to get.
Yes, this
We
does.
just have to check the boxes and move forward, so.
Yeah.
Precisely,
So, I don't know what the next step is.
yeah.
So, if I could just jump in for a second, I think let's get this one passed, because this is the one that we need to make
Absolutely.
these things. We can always ask our human resources and our city administrator and Dave Holtaling to get together and come down and see if they recommend, and maybe our city attorney, do they recommend an additional policy that might cover some of the other concerns? And we'll go off of their recommendations, and yes, maybe we should, or maybe we shouldn't,
Mhm.
and they can come back in front of us with that.
Yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense. My two concerns, just so you guys know, was one is three concerns. One is that this federal policy is very narrow in terms of what it protects. Second is the confusion that comes from people by the fact that we follow different rules about who's protected in different situations. And so I think the city could do something to clarify that. And then the third problem is that the reporting mechanism for this is not ideal. If I remember correctly, it's that someone has to contact you or come in person to Neil Park in order to file a complaint.
They can file a complaint at any location. I would be the person who would be receiving the complaint and conducting the investigation. But no, they could leave it at OPT, at City Hall Clerk's office, or, you know, bring it in and talk to me in person down in the HR office. Any of those three, sending it via email, sending it via, so I mean, but, you know, and I did like your idea, the QR codes and the signs, and David and I have talked about that, and that's something that we're planning on doing to help that, so that they can get to that, whatever the portal is, and then it's up on me to reach out to them, you know, not necessarily their responsibility to come to me.
You know, what I said in the council based on that anyway. Because, like, yeah, after reading the policy, I looked on the website for the form and I couldn't find the form.
No, I haven't done anything with, I was waiting for to do the web work until after, once the council had approved everything, and then so yeah, I haven't done any of the actual website work yet.
So I have no objections with Scott's idea that we check the boxes, because we have to check the boxes, but that we don't lose it and then
Right.
have this discussion.
Yes.
And I just want to inform the committee that we'll be bringing another Title VI policy forward for the FFA regulations. And that may be slightly different from this. It all depends on the agency and as far as their guidelines that they want followed.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, to Mike, your point about DEI policies more generally and the need for perhaps more inclusion and inclusive languages used throughout various city policies, I think it's something you've brought up repeatedly since you've been on council, and I think it's I take it in good faith, and so I think we should continue the discussion. So this, I see it as a broader discussion here.
I mean, frankly, this policy seemed like an opportunity to do that, but now that I know that we just have to do what the feds say, then
Yeah,
that's not the right opportunity, but yeah, that's
Yeah.
not an opportunity.
yeah, but it sounds as if there may be space
Yeah.
for a further discussion. So it's just sort of figuring out where and when to do that.
Right.
That was my initial question. So I don't know if it's maybe drafting something that we could then have a discussion here and perhaps in the Human Rights Commission. I don't know.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
yeah.
keep forgetting about the Human Rights Commission. That's the
Yeah.
second time I forgot about it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they offer recommendations, correct? They don't actually, they're not gonna.
We had to hammer, go back and forth and do it, and then,
Right,
then slide up, kind of like we're doing with the click, and then they can bring up
right,
almost a polished thing that we can.
right. Then the council can discuss further.
Well, maybe I should meet with, if you want my help, or,
Yeah.
I mean, you have more expertise than I do, so if you don't want my help, that's fine.
No, absolutely, I'll take whatever input, and I think having something that's more uniform, where, so we have to have the Title VI stuff, which Carrie reminded me is on the OPT RIDE site now. Part of this was to move it so that it gets linked to HR, since that made sense to me, since I was a compliance officer. It would be able to be found from either website of the OPT RIDEs or the HR, page on there. But no, I think actually, having something, that could unify complaints and not have one for police and one for OPT, and if somebody else has some other HR related complaint against, DPW or a visit to some office here in City Hall, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, not having, a bunch of different ones. Yeah.
The last thing I want to say is that my bringing this forward was in no indication, I had no reason to think that any of the bus drivers had done anything wrong. I wanted to make sure the bus drivers thought that, because I heard that some people were concerned. So I was being proactive, it's not that I was being reactive to any past problem.
If I hear anything like that, I'll be sure to pass that along. Yeah. I hadn't heard anything along those lines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Strictly a policy discussion.
Yeah.
Anything else in terms of additional? So I guess we'll leave it, we're, as you point out, Scott, we should just, move this along, and then we can have maybe another discussion at a later point about more broad DEI inclusion and language in policies. Is that sort of generally, Mike, how you would
Yeah.
describe your
Yeah.
concerns?
And can you clarify where do you guys think that should go? Should it come back to you guys, should it go to the human resources?
If you're dealing with specific HR policy, it would be here.
I guess I look at our staff that's here, where is it more comfortable? Do you guys wanna do it like in-house and then come back here, or would you like to work with the community of, human rights and try to come up with something? And send it back here. I don't want you guys to have to go to like 16 different meetings to come up with something to come here. I'm on board with whatever you guys wanna do, like,
Mike, didn't you say that the police department has a more broad, maybe that would be the basis for,
Yeah, their online form is just well designed and easy to use.
that's a place to start.
That came out of the community police board. That whole process is where that came out
Oh.
of, so yeah.
It's-
But for this, I'd be willing to work with, you know, the folks that have been appointed to to our Human Rights Commission are there for a reason. They're wonderful subject matter experts that I'd love to be able to utilize. If you wanted me to start there, I'd be happy to do so. Yeah, and then bring something back to you after I had a chance to talk with them.
Yeah,
Yeah. Does that sound?
Sounds like a good plan.
Okay, great.
alright, super. Okay, if there's nothing else, then.
We'll go ahead and bring this forward to the council.
Oh, yes, what we have in front of us?
Right.
Absolutely, yeah. The discussion was more about next steps, right?
No, I understand.
Yeah, okay, so then moving on, we'll move back to the consent, and then, our next is about change order for the River Street milling and paving. We don't need to do anything. It's really for us just
It's
to
a
see.
routine,
Yeah.
I read it over, yeah.
Yes.
I think it's us, this committee just has to sit there and give its blessing, right?
Right,
Our
right,
eyes.
it's within the budget, we'll be coming in under budget overall.
So
the
we get the
project.
10% or more mark, right?
Yeah, it's a small, I mean, the original contract amount was $19,510, so it doesn't take much to go over, and we had a significant amount to add, so it went over the 10%.
A lot of broken sidewalks you guys did, a lot of drainage repair. Not often we can be proactive, so it's good to see that we could in some spots.
Especially given all the rain.
Boy, that new drain worked wonders, let me tell you. I'll be honest with you. Even though it's slightly higher than the road right now, but
Won't be long.
it still worked.
So the last item is on strategic planning, so next steps. And I think this has been something that I've been thinking about or wondering about, kind of where we are with the strategic plan, and then as we think about our budget planning, where the strategic plan kind of fits into that as we move closer to the fall.
Can I be absent for the budget meetings this year?
Only if I can be.
What did you have in mind?
Well, just in terms of thinking about, you know, where we're at with it, what needs to be, what further steps need to be taken for it, if any. You know, I don't know if Bryce wants to
Isn't,
speak
yeah,
to any of
isn't
that.
there going to be a whole community thing involved and a consultant and everything for the strategic plan?
That's the comprehensive plan,
It's the
which
comprehensive plan.
they should eventually be tied together pretty closely. I think the comprehensive plan naturally would lead into the council's strategic plan. We did it a little bit backwards in one sense, not really backwards, we already have a comprehensive plan, it's a little bit outdated, we need to update it, that's what we're gonna try to do in the next 2 years or so, Judy. But the strategic plan that was done last year by council now, so we kind of said there's 3 levels to that. I think we had 6 or 7 in the end. Got them right here. Financial strength and economic viability, safe and healthy community, those high level strategic priorities, and then the council came up with 3 or 4 key strategies for each of those. So now the next level, the base of the pyramid, if you will, would be, I think, city staff coming together. We need to propose specific actions that support each of those strategies and priorities, and then bring that back to council, have a discussion, and ultimately adopt that, have that be agreed upon, and that's the total complete strategic plan. And we will, when we propose these specific actions and looking at this, we'll kind of try to tie that into our existing comprehensive plan, and then when we update the comprehensive plan, is kind of an iterative process. You're gonna keep doing this. I think every year the council should be looking at a strategic plan as you go into the budget process, because those strategic priorities, key strategies, all that is going to inform how we develop the budget. We wanna make sure we're meeting the council's strategic plan. Really, I think, I view the strategic plan ultimately, once it's really fully developed and implemented, that's the way we should be grading ourselves. Like, how are we progressing in our priorities as a city? You know, it should all be the strategic plan. So like everything in the comprehensive plan is not the top priority. Comprehensive plan is big vision, 10 years, all the things we wanna do. And the strategic plan is a little bit more focused than that, but still fairly broad until you get down to specific actions. Even though it's not everything the city does, it's not, you know, everything we do on a daily basis, but it gets down into some detail. I think those are the things when you look back over the last year or the last quarter, or whenever you review this, I think that's how we should be gauging and measuring our success. And if we need to change direction, then the council can talk with staff, we can update the plan. That's the gist of it. So I guess as far as next steps, I'm having a department head meeting pretty soon. Again, I'm trying to remember when it is with our staff, and we're gonna talk about developing some of these actions, and have that to propose. The second meeting in July is when the budget season kicks off, according to the charter. That's typically what we do. So I think that will be the target by the second meeting in July. If we have whether that's a special meeting or a part of our regular council meeting, we'll go through that. And that would be my goal for this year, is taking the next step with integrating strategic planning with budgeting, because they, you know, one informs the other. So as far as council members, I think, you know, reviewing this, what we have already would make sense leading up into that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, maybe you ought to
Send it out.
resend that back out to everybody and say, hey, we're
Refresh our
coming up on this,
memories.
Yeah.
we're coming up on the time of year, here's the.
Yeah, and then we have new members as well. I mean, Mike
Mhm.
wasn't privy to, you know, he wasn't here for all that discussion, so. So it's the third portion that we're at, that third step where we're taking the sort of more broad ideas and objectives and looking how they may apply on the ground. Is that sort of the,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's where we're at.
And so the budget then becomes this kind of dialogue with the strategic plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at the budget and you get to the point where, we need to cut some things, or we need to raise revenues, or both,
Mm-hmm.
we can kind of look at the strategic plan and use that to prioritize. So that's our priorities.
Mhm.
We've set those, and if we follow them, then it makes it a little bit easier to make those hard decisions, but still to make it easy.
Did we was there like a passage of the strategic plan? Did we ever like vote on them as a
I don't believe, I don't think we did, right, Karen?
I don't remember ever
I
been.
think we got to a point where we
I
had
don't remember a vote.
a document,
It
but,
was the discussion.
Yeah, I wonder if we should actually, I mean, is it possible to have them, you know, to have approval of the strategic plan as a motion in our council meeting so that we have them, you know, formalized?
yeah, I think that makes perfect sense, and I think the goal was getting the third step done and bring us
Right.
back, and we just haven't done that, so.
Mhm. So maybe that's an additional step, is to have the council approve them as a set of goals. Or as a, more generally, as a plan,
Yeah.
I should be more general,
Sure.
as a document.
Well, it's sort of implied that that's what we've done when
Of
it's
course,
published.
of course,
so,
right,
yeah.
right. But I think if it's not
fine to
formal,
do it, yeah,
sorry?
No, we can do it if you want. Sure.
Well, no, what I'm just thinking is that if something's not formalized, it often can get easily cast aside. And so I think to bring all those objectives front and center in the decision-making, maybe you need that extra, this is what we all agreed, in motion number whatever, on X date. Formal, you know, making things formal can
Mhm, yeah.
help with priorities, that this is a priority of ours to follow. Other sort of, anything else in terms of on the strategic plan or any other topics? Any points for discussion?
No?
Nothing?
Can't think of anything today.
I didn't hear that, Mike.
I said, I can't think of anything today. I took today off, I'm trying to relax
Well,
today.
that's nice. That's nice. Oh, yes.
I just wanna share one thing that we talked about on budget review committee,
Mm.
because it relates to you guys. One thing that keeps coming up from, as we're talking to different departments, is ways to reduce overtime. And one suggestion that's come up multiple times is things that volunteers could do. And so we started to just think about, explore, and I don't know what this will look like, but some kind of putting on a volunteer core, like a way for people to sign up to do things. You know, when they came up with DPW this week was like flag raising, like we're paying people, you know, time and a half for 3 hours to come and raise a flag on the weekend.
Mhm.
Whereas I'm sure we can find
Mhm.
volunteers who would love to be the person to raise the flag.
Mhm.
So, you know, that kind of thing. So
Mhm.
just that's that's all. Nothing to do at this point.
Mhm. Yeah, well, we had suggested in this committee to look at overtime across departments in terms of what
Yeah, and,
policies exist and what policies don't exist and maybe need to exist.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we're waiting on
Mm-hmm.
him to meet with all the department heads and go over the policies, which is a lot of work on you, I'm sorry.
Yes.
So today, Alan was working on graphs for me, comparing the 2020 to 2024 budgets versus actuals of those graphs. I just have to proof and, but he basically has them completed today, so that will be coming out within the next couple of weeks. So you can see what's actually in the budget compared to what we actually ended up paying. And I would just like to reiterate again, is that the DPW overtime is minimal for the amount of employees that they have. And where you're really going to find the cost of overtime is in the public safety department. And the charge will reflect that.
And we started having that conversation, and I gotta stop because we did that executive session. But we have to go back to the executive session and have that conversation again.
Well, I've said in the past that I see it as a management issue. You know, a department head has a budget, and they should do their best to stick to the budget, which includes overtime. They have a designated amount of overtime that they can spend, and if you go over that, the first thing I would ask is, what about the manager, the head of the department? And back to the Public Works Department, I think they have a very good record as far as managing overtime. I think it's, given the number of employees they have, it's really very impressive.
I think the council said it several times, the budget is the budget is the budget. You
Mhm.
gotta live within the means of the budget. And if you're gonna look like you're gonna start going over that budget line item, you have to figure out how are you going to reduce it. If that means you gotta change your policies, if that means you gotta do whatever, you're expected to do that. It goes back to your thing as, being the manager of the department. And then if you can't because we have an oddball year, or whatever, then that's where the council comes in and says, all right, to Greg and Ginny and the department, what are we looking at? How are we gonna do this? How are we gonna manage this? Where should the money come from? How should we do, but I think it needs to be established at the beginning of the year, the budget is the budget is the budget. That's what your money is, and you need to live within the means of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's hard,
Mhm.
it's uncomfortable for everybody, but.
Mhm.
But that's the job of management, to stick to the budget. And if something comes out of left field, then it comes back to us. Seems fair.
I think if you set that expectation right
Mhm.
up front at the beginning of the budget, there is no gray area where they say, well, we didn't know.
Mhm.
We're telling you, here's the budget, this is what you got, this is it.
Mhm.
You need to live within what is in your budget line.
Mhm.
Now, if they wanna work with our city administrator back and forth and take out of this budget line, cause they decided that whatever, and however they need to do that legally, that's that's fine, I'm okay with that, but that's still your budget, so you can't come back into that budget line and be like, oh, well, I used that budget line. Well, yeah, but you used it because you needed it over here. So, you know, they also have to think about that as well. Like, the budget's the budget. We're giving you this amount of money for your department. You need to live within that means with your department.
And do you think that's not been what's happening, like overall?
I think it's always been that they know they've come back to council. We've always kind of said, okay, yeah, we'll figure out we'll take it from reserves. I mean, Ginny and Greg have worked pretty hard at that of coming back, oh, we can take it out of here, well, we can do this, well, and I've heard Ginny for like, I don't know, what have I been up here, 5 years, 6 years, always sit here and say, but we gotta figure out a better way of doing this, we have to figure out how we can stop. You know, we can cover this for now because we do have this, but eventually we're not gonna have these reserves like we have now if we keep dipping into them. So we gotta figure out, you know, we have to start slowing that process down a little bit. And you know, sometimes that's kind of like our position up here is to be that, because the budget is our primary thing, is to sit there and say, you know, we can't, you know, sorry, and I understand it puts a headache on you for this year, but, you know, but I mean, we've always worked hard with our, you know, finance director and our city administrator and the department heads when they come to us and say, all right, we can take the money from here. Oh, okay, we can do this, you know. And then we start getting beat up, you know. You guys cave all, and it's not really caving, we're trying to provide the best service. Going back to the strategic plan, we're saying, okay, we're making the hard decisions. We can't do this service this year, you know. We can't pick up, I don't know, I'm gonna fret on this one, we can't pick up the brush this year. You know, we need our staff somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that's how, like, when Click, like, and even here in finance, we started looking at other alternatives. How can we still provide a service, but can they go in and weigh in so we don't have to have our people go pick them up once a month? Or, you know, Chris has been working on some different ideas with that, but that's all stuff that we have to, like, you know, we're not the city we used to be, you know?
Well, I think that gets to, so I would say two things. One, I actually don't necessarily think that the city council's job is to be cost cutting all the time. I think we gotta think about the services.
Mhm.
So that's always my emphasis, is how do we maintain the services that we provide? And then to your point about it not being the city it used to be, I think then we have to think about how do we create investments so that we can create the city that we want
Yep.
and need, that people really need. So I think there's two things going on at the same time, and I think cost cutting then creates a dynamic where you're ultimately shrinking the very thing you want to grow. So that's always my
It could be a double-edged
consideration.
sword, 100%. 100% agree with you.
Yeah.
It could be it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but I think I think also the public has to see our decisions out here and what we're battling with, and sometimes they don't. Like, okay, maybe we can't provide that service right now.
Yeah.
Not saying we can't do it in the future, but we might have to suspend that service, or we might have to alter how we do it.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's, okay, it's nice you guys want to go down this path, but we just can't do it yet. Like, we have to increase our revenues, we have to figure out how we're gonna get some, you know, we always go back to overtime in public service. You know, you're not gonna make money in your public service the way, you know, people would hope you would.
Right.
But are we providing too much? Are we providing, I don't want to say too much, are we providing the level that we can afford? And that's the first thing we have to look at. Let's look at what we can afford,
Yeah.
make sure we're doing that right. And then the extras that get tacked on is just that, it's extras. Like, okay, can we do this? Can we do this? Do we need such a big fleet? I'm just throwing that out there. I hope nobody
Right.
sits there, but these are just like general things. Let's look at the fleet. Do we need such a big fleet in that department? Is that something that, are we getting the manpower that we need? If we're not, do we need all these vehicles? Can we come, you know, back down on some of the vehicles, because that's where we get some savings without cutting service.
Right,
Nothing says we can't put it back,
right.
but it's like right now, we're meeting the needs of what we need to meet. And then we're gonna go, okay, as we grow, okay, now you can get a specialty vehicle because now we can meet what you need. But right now, you're providing that service, but we don't have all the equipment that you need. So are we really doing justice for anybody? Somebody's gonna get hurt, and that's what we don't want. Where we can't just come up and be honest, we just can't do it. We do but we're gonna get there, but this is how we have to get there. We have to take it up front first, and then grow it to the back. You know, it's not saying no forever, it's just saying no in this point in time. You know, if we're gonna provide something, I think we need to really look at, are we providing the best service we can, the best way we can? You know, so I understand what you're saying, like budget cuts, and I'm not like saying we're gonna cut the budget, I don't wanna say that, like we're not, when I say we may not be able to do that service, I'm not saying, well, maybe we just can't do it yet. You know, we gotta get this under control so that we can do this. And how is this gonna affect everything? You know?
And that's where I think it comes down to strong creative management on the department heads. And I think all our department heads everybody's very competent. And, you know, if they know that they have to live within their budget, I'm sure they will all step up and do that and continue to provide the best service possible.
And maybe some of that's the feedback that we need when we say that this is the budget's the budget, you can't go over it. I think some of the feedback is to make our decisions is, all right, well, I did that, but now here's where I'm at. I'm, 8 months in, we're not meeting X, Y, and Z, and that puts the hard decision on us. How are we going to do it? Because that's kind of like,
And then we would have to decide if it's reasonable that they gave it their best shot, and that something unusual happened where we have to look at it again.
Well, sure, I mean, if you look at something unusual, like all the ice this past winter, right, I mean.
Yeah.
It's
Say when we get
unusual.
10 feet of snow in
Sure.
the month of
Right.
February, yeah, that's different.
Yeah. But I think the question about cost cutting is something that the strategic plan would speak to.
I agree with this.
If you have certain commitments, if you make certain commitments as a council to certain provisions that are granted to the public, you have to stay committed to those priorities, it seems. So that's where I think the strategic plan is really useful.
Greg, what's the first item on the strategic plan?
They're not in any particular order. The first one is financial strength and
Right.
economic
That's
viability.
Yeah, financial strength, so we
Yeah,
wanna
and
make sure that we're.
I'm not as convinced that's actually an item that's worthy of a strategic plan, actually, because that's something that we, a city has to have. It's not a vision, it's not like, this is what the future holds for our community. It's like, of course we have to be financially, so I'm
So
not
we don't wanna do
sure.
anything that threatens that, so we have to
Yeah,
be.
I guess in our discussions about the strategic plan, I guess I would call into question that first item as being something really useful anyway, to have explicitly stated. Something we can continue to think about.
Yeah, I don't know, I think I might be on the opposite side of that one, but I can also see your point. So it's like, I'm not like dead set, oh my God, this has gotta be on there.
Yeah,
The strategic plan's also gotta be a living document that can move with the times.
absolutely.
And that's, I think, sometimes we forget about, when times change, we forget to change some of the stuff that we're doing. Most dangerous words ever spoken are, it's the way it is, it's the way it's been, it's the way it's always gonna be. Most dangerous words anybody can ever say. They should be saying, this is what we're doing now, but what can we do better? Okay, it didn't work this time,
Right.
we tried this once, it didn't work, but can we retry it, because times have changed, or, well, this just doesn't really look like it's working anymore the way it was.
Right,
Because we've done it this way forever,
right,
we haven't really moved that ball forward.
right.
I think our staff does a great job of doing that. They look outside the box. We ask them to do some things that they probably look at us and think we're all nuts, but they come back with a plan.
Mhm.
So
set a record.
Can I just
Oh.
add a statement?
Please, yes.
Just food for thought, if the city is not in a strong financial position, that will strongly affect the strategic plan. So I just want you to keep that in mind.
I have something also.
Yeah.
Our department and a few other departments use the comprehensive plan and the strategic plan for everything that we do.
I didn't hear that last part.
Our department and other departments in the city use the comprehensive plan and the strategic plan to guide every single thing that we do. They're implemented constantly.
So they matter.
They matter. They're
It's
used.
an organizational
Just-
structure.
And I just wanna put out there, like, when we discuss back and forth, I don't want any of our city staff, departments or anything like that, think they're not doing their job, because they are. And they do it very well, do it very, very well. So when we have conversations, I just want them to know it's not, we think that they're not doing what's there. I know sometimes when we get around the budget discussions, it gets pretty heated, it gets very, and nothing I ever say, I hope, is taken personal, because it's never meant that way. And if anybody ever takes it personal, come up and give me a good slap in the back of the head and say, knock it off. I'm okay with that. Like, our city administrator's called me a couple times to say, hey, what do you mean by this? Well, not the way it's being taken. So, they're hard discussions. They're just discussions we're having. It's throwing a bunch of ideas out there. It's throwing a bunch of stuff out there, but doesn't mean they're good ideas, doesn't mean they're bad ideas. It's just a discussion that we have to have.
I think that's an important point to raise as we get into the discussions around the budget. Because I think the tone of the discussions are really as important as the content.
Mm-hmm.
And the tone has to remain civil and, I think, respectful.
It's okay to disagree. We all have
Absolutely.
different opinions. But
Absolutely.
at the end of the day, we're all here to do the best job that we can for,
For whatever reason.
and it's okay, if you don't think you got enough information, it's okay to ask. Respectfully ask. I don't think anybody purposely omits information to us. They're trying to weed out some of the stuff that they don't think we need, because it's kind of getting us down in the weeds. That's the way I've always looked at it, but I've never had anybody say, you don't need that, when I've asked the question, I think we gotta work on our trust all the way around.
So those are, I think, really important points that I hope we can touch on when we have a council discussion about the budget and the strategic plan. Trust is, community trust is really important. I agree.
There just seems to always, living in the city like I have in my life, there always seems to at some point be a disconnect somewhere. There's like, sometimes you don't have that trust between the residents to the council, or some of the residents think that don't have the trust for the staff, which I don't understand why, and I kind of look at it as, I think it's the council's fault. We're not the ones getting out there to
Building
our
those
residents to
connections.
build those
Yeah.
connections and the
Yeah.
trust, and
Yeah.
that falls on us,
Yeah,
100% on us.
yeah.
And we have to learn to bridge that gap, because if we can learn to bridge that gap, I don't think you're gonna, I would hope you'd see some of this rhetoric settle down a little bit, that, as we saw over the last few months.
Yeah, I agree.
And I
Yes.
made this statement then, and I'll make it again right here, I will protect the city staff the best I can.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. Anything?
No, I
To the
think,
strategic
that
plan?
covers
If I could make a real
Yeah.
quick announcement.
Sure.
We did kick off police recruiting today, and I didn't get a chance to put anything out on social, but it is now up on the website. 2 huge changes to police recruiting this year. First of all, the age limit has been raised by the state, so if you know anybody out there that is over 35 but below 43 that thought their dream of being a police officer was over, here's their chance. Because we can now have people take the test as long as they have not reached their 43rd birthday as of the date that they take the written exam. So that's great that the state was able to
You
do
can
that.
start your police career at 43?
Actually, up to 49 now, if you have some veteran service that can subtract from your age, yeah, so.
That's usually when they're leaving.
Yeah.
How about past experience of right in the 49 spot?
And then this is also, we're taking advantage of the fact that the state is now allowing continuous recruitment when it comes to police officers. So now that we've announced it, this will be our last police announcement. We will run off of this announcement perpetually moving forward, and we will hold multiple exams off of this announcement, meaning we'll be able to accept applications now year-round, rather than only when we have an active announcement up. So
That's a
both of those two
big
things
step.
are great advantages for the city, and when you start seeing that social, please share it to your constituents, and hopefully I'll have it out there, if not tomorrow, on Saturday. So,
And is this in response to the decline in?
yes, yeah, the state's been very aggressive with this, so this continuous recruitment, allowing this in a centralized exam structure like they have right now. They're doing it for police, they're doing it for fire, which we'll talk about next time we have a fire exam. We'll talk about whether we're gonna start it for fire or not. And then corrections officers. It's limited to those three professions that they're allowing this for, so, yeah.
Thank you. I know New York City's had a decline, so I was curious if it's for the wider state. It sounds like it, yeah.
The fact that New York City, NYPD can now transfer upstate is causing massive, yeah, that's new within the last year too. And, so they've got a lot of people moving out of New York City.
Interesting.
And, you know, maybe we'll get one of them, so,
Yeah. Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome,
Great.
thank you.
That's huge.
It's huge.
Maybe it'll make your job a little bit easier now.
It might.
Yeah.
We'll see.
And the civil service, just a quick question, there's
Sure.
still the New York Helps is still in
Yep, so I did deliver an
Process.
update on that to the commission at yesterday's meeting. I won't go too far into the weeds, but the state is looking at moving out of the help into a new reformed civil service, either at the end of 26 or the end of 27.
yeah,
I would lean more towards the end of 27.
okay.
But yes, there is a light at the end of the tunnel towards returning to some form of brand new civil service
Oh, interesting.
system when it comes to
Wow.
testing, yeah. Which I'm excited about what they have, and like I said, I don't wanna waste a bunch of people's time with
Yeah.
geeking out on civil service stuff, but if you have questions, I'd be happy to stay after and answer them, so, yeah.
Thanks. All right, well, if there's no other items, then I move to adjourn at